As someone who's never played the games, when I hear Five Nights at Freddy's, my mind immediately goes to this.
Five Nights at Freddy's.
What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. So today I'm giving you my review of Five Nights at Freddy's, or FNAF. This is based on the popular video game series, and it stars Josh Hutcherson and Matthew Lillard. I am not going to be spoiling anything, so don't worry about spoilers. But before I get in this thing, be sure to hit that like button, comment down below your thoughts on this film, your predictions or expectations if you have not yet seen it. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to help reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers here on the channel, and check out the podcast link down below for weekly episodes. We have a ton of fun with it over there. But before I talk about the movie, I have to give you guys my history with Five Nights at Freddy's. Like I said up front, I've never really played the games. I think for like 10 or 15 minutes at my buddy's house once we played it, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. It's like a jump scare game, but I've never really explored the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's, played many of the games. So this review is coming from the perspective of somebody who's really unfamiliar with it and is kind of just judging this based on a movie, not as a hardcore FNAF fan, which I think this movie is more catered to. We'll talk about that later on. But let's start with the positives. When it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's, it's carried by a lead performance in Josh Hutcherson. Now, when I think Josh Hutcherson, my mind immediately goes to the Hunger Games, as he is Peter Malak in that franchise. And he's good enough here, you know. He plays this nighttime security guard who starts working at Freddy's, and things start to unravel that are a little suspicious or sketchy, and that's kind of the launching point for the movie. But Hutcherson's really good. He steps into this role after, I don't know how long since I've seen him in something, but he comes in and he kills it. Matthew Lillard, with his limited screen time, I thought was delightful, and that's pretty on par. I mean, he's the man when it comes to horror films, and he crushes it here yet again. So yeah, those two performances are strong and pretty much carry this movie for me. I like the soundtrack of the movie. There are specific songs that are used. I was like, okay, yeah, I can get on board with this. And I will say it creates a creepy atmosphere with this abandoned, you know, pizza place. I equate it to like Chuck E. Cheese. It definitely had that abandoned, spooky feel where like, I definitely wouldn't want to spend a night here alone, because things could get wacky and wild real quick. But aside from those, I can't really say too much positive about the film, because unfortunately, this just wasn't for me. When it comes down to it, Five Nights at Freddy's was a really repetitive movie. Now, I know by nature, my knowledge of the game, it's a repetitive game, you know. You are working these nights, the security shift, each night you're trying to survive the night. And this film sort of adapts that plot, but also it just gets really repetitive by nature with these dream sequences, and the movie never really feels like it's progressing. It's like we're stuck in the mud, repeating the same scenes over and over, and that just got frustrating as a viewer. I was like, is this going anywhere? What are we building up to? It felt pretty meaningless for a good chunk of the runtime, and I'd say my biggest issue with this movie by far is the fact that it has no clue what it really wants to be. Obviously, it's marketed as a horror thriller film, but when you go watch the movie itself, it's not really that. There are scenes where it'll try and build up to a jump scare and have you on the edge of your seat, so it's got like some tame thrills and attempts to be a horror movie, but then for the majority of the runtime, it's like a family drama of sorts. And then at times it'll try and insert some comedy. So does it want to be a movie in the same vein as Scream, where it's like a horror comedy making fun of the horror genre? I don't know what this movie wants to be. It never comes right out and says, hey, this is what I am, let me fully embrace that. And that was a huge issue I had. And then that leads into another point. Who's this movie really for? I think it's probably only for FNAF fans. Like, if you're not a fan of the video games, I don't know how much enjoyment you'll find with this movie, because it doesn't really build up to anything. It sort of just exists to try and capitalize off of the FNAF brand, which it may or may not do. We'll see how it does at the box office. But to me, it was so shallow. Like, the main plot was almost non-existent to me. It's just very paper thin, and I didn't find any of the characters particularly that likable, which was really upsetting to me, because I was sold on that first trailer. I was like, this can be a fun horror movie. I like the idea, but the execution is just not there in my opinion. And again, I don't know if this movie will appeal to the masses. If you're a hardcore FNAF fan, I'm sure there's Easter eggs and little moments that you'll get a kick out of, but other than that, these animatronics aren't scary. Like, this movie is marketed as a horror film, and it's not scary at all. So if you go in expecting like to be just terrified or even have a mild thrill, like, you're probably not going to be satisfied, because there are just moments that are ridiculous. The movie gets super stupid at times, indefensibly dumb, if you will, and it honestly felt like they had this idea. They're like, okay, Five Nights at Freddy's, super popular video game. Let's just take that IP, put it on a poster, hope we can make some money off it, and not really try and tell a compelling story with characters that anyone really gives a damn about. It was bizarre. It was wild. When the movie ended, I was like, that felt like 30 minutes in a bad way. And a big con for me when it comes to the FNAF movie is how predictable it is. I had base knowledge of the lore of FNAF. Some people had tried to explain it to me once in a live stream, and I've talked to some people about it. But even with that base knowledge, I knew immediately the big twists in this movie and what was going to unfold in the third act. The second a certain character says a line early on, I was like, oh, did that not just give away the big reveal? And when a certain scene happens near the end of the movie, I was like, is this like shocking? I was looking around like, are people supposed to be like, this is a Shyamalan twist? Like, what? Like, no, it's not that at all. And it just baffled me how the movie thought it was so much smarter than it actually was. I was astounded, honestly. I was like, damn, this movie's really predictable. And it shocked me how obvious everything was. It was written on the wall from the first 10 minutes. So the conclusion I've come to is this movie's just not for me. If you're a hardcore FNAF fan, you'll probably find some enjoyment with it, but it's just hard to take a concept like that and make it into a movie that appeals to the masses, where these animatronics that look like they belong at a Chuck E. Cheese or something are supposed to be remotely scary or terrifying. It just didn't work. Like, this movie didn't know what it wanted to be. Was it supposed to be a horror thriller? Was it supposed to be a horror comedy? Was it supposed to be a family drama? It never had a genre, so there were these tones that were constantly clashing, and it just did not work as a final product. So to be honest, I'm not a fan of this movie. I can't recommend it. Unless you're like a hardcore FNAF fan and you've been waiting to see this, I don't think this is really going to appeal to you, and I'm really curious to see how the general population of people who go to the movies respond to this, because I was just like, as the credits rolled, I was like, that doesn't even really feel like a movie. It's kind of how I felt about the Super Mario Bros. Movie, where it was like, let's throw the Nintendo IP at the wall and hope it lands, and that's kind of how it is here. Like, here's all these FNAF characters, but there's not much of a story to tell here. It's really underwhelming. I wanted it to be scarier than it was. It wasn't. I wanted it to be a fun time. It wasn't that. It was just kind of a dull movie that exists. Pretty much going to forget about this one in a few weeks, and it's safe to say I'm not a fan of FNAF. I think the only people who will be hardcore fans of this movie are the diehards who play the games religiously and love this lore. Five Nights at Freddy's was not for me, but let me know what you guys think of this one in the comments down below, and be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help reach my goal of 100,000 subscribers here on the channel. It would mean a lot. And that'll do it. Stay tuned for more content coming very soon, but until next time, I'll see you guys later.